Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Friday, the 27th of July, 2012. I'm Jim Ninsel, host of Political Roundtable, our weekly analysis and commentary on local, state, and national politics. Tonight on the Roundtable, we'll talk about whether voters will get a chance to approve a sales tax in November and look at some of the heated politics in the local Republican Party. Joining me this evening is Pima County Democratic Party Chairman Jeff Rogers, Pima County Republican Party Chairwoman Carolyn Cox, and former Republican lawmaker Pete Hirschberger. Thanks to all of you for being here. Before we dig into the events of the week, we have an interview with Tucson Mayor Jonathan Rothschild, who joined us in the studio earlier today. Joining the roundtable now in the studio is Mayor Jonathan Rothschild of Tucson. Mayor Rothschild, thanks for joining us here on Political Roundtable.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Let's talk about your 360-degree plan. I think you just put that out to look ahead at the year you've got coming up here. One of your key points in that is to pass a $100 million bond program, hoping the voters will give you some money for road repair. Voters have been a little reluctant to support the city. They rejected that sales tax last year. What makes you think you can turn it around this year?
Well, to tell you the truth, Jim, I don't know if I can, but I know that I don't really have a choice and that we in the city don't have a choice. First thing is that this road bond is much different than a sales tax increase. This road bond is $100 million going directly back to local contractors, all $100 million of it, to actually fix our roads. The sales tax was on purchases of goods, really for city services. And this police and fire, things we needed, but this is a lot different. And for instance, in San Diego, when they started their economic turnaround, they started it with a road bond issue. And I've looked at our roads, and if I don't pass it this year, we'll have to run it again next year. Our roads have not been fixed the way they need to. And we're not talking about potholes. We're talking about failed roads in the city. And if we're going to move forward as a city, we're going to have to do it. It's $27 a year for the average household, $2.50 a month for a few years to have better roads.
And the longer you wait to repair the roads, the more it's going to cost you.
It's more expensive.
Another element of your plan, calling for more annexation in the future. You just went through a fairly controversial annexation at River and Craycroft Roads. You took in a parcel there where a developer hopes to build a hotel, a school, some other projects on that area. And there was some resistance, particularly from folks in the county. The county administrator, Chuck Huckleberry, has said that he was trying to negotiate a deal that ensured more bank protection along the Rito River, extending the Rito River Park and some road work up there on River Road because of the increased traffic that will come with this. And he suggested that the city, by stepping in, did not cut a good enough deal and undercut the county's position there. Can you respond to his concern?
Sure. The bank protection that the developer agreed to is the exact bank protection that the county was asking for. The developer has agreed to put in the bike trail. That's huge to the city. We very much want it. As soon as the county does anything over on the eastern side of that. And with regard to the traffic issue, we've required in our annexation that there be more traffic studies before we go forward. But I think the important part about my annexation plan is we're not really looking at a project-by-project basis. What we're looking at, I've started to look at some maps actually yesterday, what we're looking at is where there are revenues that support service areas being population, because what we're losing is $70 million a year or thereabouts in state shared revenue because we failed as a county over all these years to incorporate. We are, measured by childhood poverty, the poorest county in the state. Something about our model for the last 30 or 40 years hasn't worked, Jim. If you could bring back $70 million to this region, not just the city, but to the region, imagine what we could do with services. Imagine what we might be able to do to cut taxes.
And that's an argument that's been made in the past, and yet the folks in the Catalina foothills and other unincorporated areas don't seem to have said, hey, we want to be part of the city of Tucson. How do you change that?
Well, for a number of years, I don't think anyone's asked. And I think the economics, certainly at the state level, have changed. And we do have to go out on a house-by-house basis and, explain that we have a fine police department, your fire and your garbage come within your tax base. And water is a huge issue, of which the city is basically serving all those unincorporated areas, or most of them, and I call it waterization without representation. You're living in an area where the most important issue in the region you don't get to vote on. I think people are going to want to do it, Jim.
Let's talk a little bit about downtown. The city is pushing ahead with using a community development block grant to improve the old Marist College downtown, and there's been some critics who are saying this is a gift to the Catholic Church, which owns the building.
Right. It's not a gift to the Catholic Church, and there's been, I will tell you, in my 7-8 months in office, surprisingly to me, probably the most controversial thing we've done. But partly because I don't think the whole story's gotten out there. First of all, what we've done is we've made a proposal to the diocese which says that the diocese can have no financial interest, that they have to pay back, that they have to warrant that the money that we're going to put in is going to reserve and preserve this structure that is on the National Historic Registry, and that the city can take ownership of the property at any time and will have ultimate control over what the project is. So the idea is that you take a National Historic building and you save the building, and whether we get a private developer to come in and do something, or we put partly public purpose, which is also the stipulation we sent back to the church, the diocese, we'll see what the diocese says. This deal is not over, but we've got to try to go forward. By the way, this CBDG money, people don't fully understand, can only be used for specific purposes. It can't be used to fill potholes. It can't be used to get us police. One of the specific purposes is for historic buildings, and used all over the country for that purpose.
And in general, on downtown, your 360 plan also calls for finally deciding what to do with the Tucson Convention Center, whether we're going to have a downtown hotel, whether we're going to have a downtown arena, and working more closely with the Rio Nuevo board. So in terms of what you'd like to see happen with those projects, and also with what's happening with the Rio Nuevo, the new Rio Nuevo board, different from the board that was there when you were first elected, talk to me a little bit about what you're thinking there.
Well, first of all, having the new board in place, we are hopeful that we're going to be able to go forward. I worked very hard with the old board for about 7 months, and it became apparent after a while that there wasn't a whole lot of movement to go forward as much as to blame for the past. I think the new board very much wants to go forward. I think a couple of their early moves probably were a little premature, and the good news is we're talking to them regularly, and we have the same ideas in mind. 1, settle the lawsuits. 2, deal with the Tucson Convention Center and the arena. And 3, go forward with appropriate public projects. And I'm hopeful. I think that the original model by the legislature, which was to start with an economic driver of an arena, convention center, and hotel, is a model that can work. I know that Mr. McCusker, who's now the chair of that board, would like to do some other things like streetscapes and other public projects. And I'm going to remain hopeful until further notice.
All right, and we've got about a minute left. Sure. Do you want to talk about anything else in the 360 plan that we haven't hit upon yet?
Sure, Jim. As a good journalist, you've hit upon some of the big things, but there's small things that we can do that can really help the city that are in the 360. Things like getting a business incentive program in place. Things like getting our planning department restructured within the city. Things like taking data-driven management to help the city operate. And really the final thing I would say, which is what I like to do, and I guess that's why, but I think it's the core of all public service, is constituent service. If you have a problem in the city or with the city, you email me, I get that email out directly to a department head, and I have been really pleased with the fact that my department heads answer me and every constituent within 48 hours. And my job to get that trust back for the road bond, for the annexation, whatever it might be, is to win one person over at a time. You know, there is a place for government if it's done right.
All right, we'll leave it there, but thank you for stopping by the Political Roundtable this weekend.
Appreciate it every time, Jim. Thank you.
And we're back with the regular roundtable, another busy week in politics. This week we saw a lawsuit challenging the so-called jungle primary, the open primary initiative that's going to be may be on the ballot this November. This is an initiative that would change our primary system so that everybody, instead of having separate primaries for the different political parties. All of the candidates would run in one big primary with the two top vote getters going on to the general election. Jeff, this lawsuit that's been filed says that this is a violation of the state's single subject law. It has too many elements to it for voters to decide it. And you're not a supporter of the proposition yourself, but do you think this lawsuit challenging it has merit?
Well, it's difficult to say. The body of law we have on the single subject rule says that if there is one goal that you can see all of the things focused towards that one goal, then they take a pragmatic approach that even though it may affect, as the people challenging it say here, 70 different statutes throughout the Arizona revised statutes, that it still, because of this single focus, could be constitutional. So it's going to be a tough one because it does affect the many different statutes that will have to be changed to conform to it. So right now the group challenging it is put up by the Republican Party. The Democratic Party has not yet taken a position on it. I anticipate we're probably going to be opposed to it because it seems to have a lot of unintended consequences and a lot of chances for mischief in people who falsely register as one party or the other to try to affect the results. And I think we've talked before that you could have a primary where in a dominant Republican district where 3 Republicans ran and 2 Democrats ran, the 2 Democrats could win if the vote is evenly split by the Republicans. So there's a lot of unintended consequences that we have to sort out, and I think personally, I'd like to see California just remain the experiment and see how it plays out for a few years.
And Carolyn, you're not a supporter of this proposition either.
No, I'm really not, because I think it's so hard right now even to get people out to vote that without the motivation of the parties getting people out to vote, it would be a problem. And then the other thing is, how do you elect the precinct committeemen? Because they are the people who do get the people out to vote, and they are partisan elections. So, do you just take do you just look into the precinct and elect X number of people and hope they're going to work to accomplish what the precinct committeemen do today? I mean, I just think it's not a good idea.
And Pete, you're more supportive of the idea.
That's right. I think it's interesting that the two parties object to it. It addresses a real problem in Arizona, the extremist politics and policy that we have in Arizona. And furthermore, it helps empower the independents. I think the independents will have a much stronger voice in politics and policy as a result of this.
Well, Pete's exactly right in its laudable goals, but the fact is that it did not increase independent participation one iota in California in the June elections that they held there. So I think it's problematic, and that even though the goals are laudable, I'm not sure that it's going to be able to achieve those goals.
All right, and speaking of lawsuits and future propositions, there was another lawsuit this week. Ken Bennett said he would appeal a ruling by a lower court that said that the proposition to raise the sales tax or continue the 1-cent sales tax could remain on the ballot despite some problems with some of the paperwork that was turned in with this. Pete, what did you think of the Secretary of State's decision to appeal this decision?
Well, I think it's very disappointing. I think it's what is up with Ken Bennett? Is he trying to move further to the right in anticipation of running for governor? If so, I don't think a very good move for him, because I think he's going to isolate himself from a great deal of the population. Why would he appeal this when the court has already ruled? Let's go forward, let the people speak.
Carolyn, your thoughts on the Secretary of State's decision to go ahead and appeal this decision by the lower court?
Yeah, actually, I'd rather speak to just the idea of extending the sales tax, if I could, please.
Absolutely.
We were promised that the sales tax would expire. And I think it should expire because it was supposed to cover a temporary problem. It seems like that our taxes are already 2.5 times what they are in Maricopa County, and I think we're just doing, again, more things to discourage businesses from coming here. And the other thing is that I'm not really excited about throwing more money towards the existing school system. I would love to see us do something like Mayor Bloomberg did in New York, and he instituted over 100 charter schools, and it turns out that the performance in these charter schools has been better even than throughout all of New York, not just the poor section. But I think we do a terrible disservice to our poorer sections of town by not having really good schools. And I would love to see us do something like Mayor Bloomberg did in New York.
And Jeff, on the question of the proposition, and I want to get back to the whole question of funding here in a second, but on the question of the Bennett's decision, Secretary of State Bennett's decision to appeal this.
Well, I can't add a whole lot to what Pete said. I'm truly disappointed because he lied to us in an op-ed piece that was published in the Arizona Daily Star. He said if the judge found against him, he would not appeal it and he would put it on the ballot. But instead, I think that this Arizona Tax Research Association, a kind of right-wing group, has his ear and they're telling him what to do. And I think, as Pete suggested, he's thinking ahead to the next election and how he can appeal to primary voters in that election. And I do support the Quality Jobs and Education Initiative. It, unlike the prior 1 cent sales tax, which it will extend, it ties the hands of the legislature, and it locks in funding at the 2011-12 or 12-13 fiscal year, whichever is greater. It locks in that base level of funding, and all of the funding that this would raise, well, 80% of it would go towards supplementing the educational funding for K through 12, for tribal schools, for community colleges, and for universities. And so I think that it's a good initiative. I think the voters will support it. Polling seems to suggest the voters do support it, and I'm just shocked that Ken Bennett's trying an end run to keep it off the ballot.
And I think the initiative will appeal to the voters because the legislature cannot take funding out the back door from education as they've done previously. And I think the citizens of Arizona are tired of the lack of support for our public education system.
See, that's just not true. They get over 50% of all of the money collected in Arizona goes to the school system right now. And the more money we put into the school system, we do not see any change in performance. And it is the performance that was what we were after, not trying to throw more money into a dysfunctional system. And I really do think that it would behoove our legislators to look at what New York City has done, because what we really care about is having a good education for all of our children. And this particular proposal has a lot of money going to other things other than education, but I also do not think it's right for propositions to tie the hands of legislators, because that's what happened this last time when we had the downturn and there were so many things that they could not cut in order to balance the budget, and it was one of the reasons that they had to go after school funding. So, if you elect these legislators and you elect them, that's what a representative government is. You elect them and then you assume they're going to study the issues and do what's right. And if you don't like what they do, vote them out. But when you tie their hands, then we have a real problem.
Well, I think you might want to tie their hands if they were dead last in funding per student in the nation. Then I think that's what appeals to people is we must tie these people's hands. Theoretically, I have to agree with her. I wouldn't like to see my hands tied as a state legislator. I'd like to have the freedom to do it, but we can't trust these people to do the right thing when it comes to education.
That's where I'd like to hear from you. You've served here at the legislature.
Direct democracy has its downfalls and its dangers, and that's the initiative process.
You bet.
The reason we have such an active direct democracy initiative process in Arizona is because the legislature doesn't do their job. They don't do what the citizens want them to do, and that's support public education.
Okay, and Carolyn, did you want to?
Well, I don't want to support public education the way it's going. I would love to really educate these children, because if you do not, you doom them to poverty forever if they do not get a good education, and they are not coming out proficient.
But we do have a fairly robust charter system here in the state, though. You're saying
Well,
New York City has done this charter stuff, but we've done some pretty. We're fairly open to charter education here in Arizona too, aren't we?
I don't know. Maybe we're not doing it right, because what Bloomberg has done seems to have worked. What Jeb Bush did in Florida seemed to work, and our goal should be not in just getting more money, but getting better education and turning these people out. However you do that,
This initiative has accountability measures built into it, both for reading levels at various grades, both teacher accountability issues, as well as many others. So that's another part of this that I think will appeal to voters.
Okay. We all have the same goal, is to improve our education system.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the state actually had some good news on the financial front. We finished the fiscal year, I think, with a $379 million surplus.
Right.
Carolyn, does this mean the state's finances are on solid ground?
Well, no, it doesn't mean they're on solid ground. It means at least they're not running a deficit, because you have no idea what the future may hold. I mean, if it turns out that we get a whole bunch more people thrown into Medicaid, we're going to be in super hurt as far as that kind of funding is concerned, the Access program. And, that's kind of what happened to us when John Napolitano brought in all of those people into Access, saying that the tobacco money would pay the cost, and then it didn't. So, no, I think it should be put away from the rainy day fund, and let's see what develops.
So be cautious. Pete, how did we get here with this surplus?
I think with all the cuts we've made, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of cuts to education, to higher education. On one hand, we're not funding kids' care. On the other hand, legislative leaders are entering into lawsuits against the redistricting commission when that issue's already been solved. We have dire needs here in Arizona that we must address, and that's what some of the surplus should go for.
And I couldn't agree more. The fact is, yesterday a study was released that showed Arizona is 46th in the nation in child well-being. And in some of the ways we balance the budget on the backs of children. And I'll tell you, one way we did it was in education cuts, and another way we did it was in access cuts to poor children who are now without health care. We have twice as many children who don't have health care insurance in Arizona as is the national average. Over 25% of children in this state are now living in poverty, which is way in excess of what the national average is. So we should use some of this surplus to backfill some of those areas in education and in health care for children living in poverty, and then go from there. But we really do need to spend some of it on needed things.
And as Carolyn points out, we still don't know what's going to happen in terms of the whether or not the state will move forward with extending access under the Affordable Care Act, which could be a gigantic bill towards the future, but also bring in a great deal of federal money into the health care
and a great deal of economic benefits. I mean, you're going to have to hire a lot more doctors, nurses, and other health care workers, and that money goes through the economy and produces more jobs and more economic recovery.
Or we could do a much smarter thing, and that is make it a free market. In other words, repeal Obamacare, replace it with the free market type decisions, and bring down the costs, re-attract doctors back into the practice of medicine where they don't have to work through a bureaucrat, and be able to pay them more and yet not have the cost for health care go up.
And we'll see, I guess, whether that happens after our national elections.
Right.
But Carolyn, I wanted to ask you, there was reports this week or last week about some dispute at the executive committee meeting for the Republicans. A couple of guys seemed to get a little physical with one another. And can you tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Oh, well, as I told you earlier, it's sort of like a couple of eighth graders out on the playground pushing and shoving.
So it
was basically nothing.
Tempest in a teapot. Yes. But one of the things I hear is that this is the sort of thing that kind of drives a lot of people away from politics. Is that they don't want to go to meetings where this sort of thing happens. And Pete, is this an ongoing problem, you think, in just politics these days?
Absolutely, and particularly right now in the Republican Party, where the far right wing of the Republican Party seems to be driving the agenda, and the establishment of the Republican Party really is against that, and so there are struggles within the Republican Party, and I've been involved in that.
And Jeff, is this going on with the Democrats as well?
I don't think so. We're pretty unified. Occasionally we'll have some people a little disgruntled about one thing or another, but we don't have a current struggle for sort of the heart of our party.
Well, and we really don't either. I mean, you just they get publicity because they post out on Facebook, but they're appealing to about 10 or 12 of them. They're just loud and noisy.
And We had a debate last night for the 4 Republicans running in District 1, running for the retiring Ann Day's seat on the Pima County Board of Supervisors. 4 candidates meeting there: Allie Miller, a Tea Party organizer; Mike Kellen, a longtime party activist; Vic Williams, a state lawmaker; and Stuart McDaniel, who's a conservative and a guy in a real estate business. And Carolyn, you were there. Do you get a sense that any of these candidates are breaking away from the pack and moving out into the lead here?
No, actually, I get a sense that all 4 of them did a very, very good job, and they all have their own backers and that kind of thing. But I thought the debate went very, very well, and no, I didn't see one really outperforming the other.
Okay, and early voting does start in a week, so I guess we're going to find out exactly what's going on here. But Pete, you are kind of familiar with that area. Do you get any sense?
Absolutely. I don't. Again, I still don't have clarity in this. I think Mike Helen is the class of that group, but I don't know who's going to win.
Okay, and Jeff, I won't ask you about the District 1 race. You're a Democrat. You probably don't have a lot of insights into that. But Sheriff Joe Arpaio taking the stand earlier this week in the civil rights trial up in Phoenix, and we have less than a minute left. But did you pay attention to his testimony there?
I did, and boy, he was pretty meek and mild up there. He tried to explain that he had the flu, but he was confronted with words from the book that he said many times he wrote personally, and that appeared to be pretty racist comments, and he had to backtrack and blame it on his ghostwriter. And then when confronted with interviews that he did on national television, he backed away from those as well as some of his policies and directions to his staff. I think he's in big trouble on this lawsuit.
All right, and we're going to have to leave it there. That's all the time we have tonight, but you can learn more about what's happening in politics by visiting azpm.org/yourvote. And while you're on the website, we'd love to hear your thoughts about tonight's program, so be sure to leave us a comment. To find out the latest from AZPM, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Stay tuned next for the News Hour, and then at 8:30, tune into Arizona Week for an in-depth look at the state's solar energy industry. And for more politics, Arizona Illustrated brings you a forum with the candidates for Congressional District 3 on Monday, and then on Tuesday, a debate between Ray Carroll and Sean Collins for the Pima County Board of Supervisors. I'm Jim Ninsel. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend.